All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about Marxism and just have a general good intro to Marxism as an ideology. It may be helpful for you to see my other YouTube video prior to this on scientific socialism. That may be helpful as a precursor to this. But this video will mostly cover everything that will be on Friday's quiz. Okay, so this is really important material. I'm sorry you don't have a whiteboard, so I would recommend taking down notes off of this whole video. You'll also find that on your Unit 3 oral exam study guide that you'll find this information on there running from questions 16 through probably 25 or so. So, and perhaps some later videos. But here we go. So, first off, what are the defining features of scientific socialism? So, forgive me, the 5 things we're going to talk about in this video are scientific socialism, Marxism, Engels' history, the problem and solution, so the contradiction, and finally a quick comparison of Marx versus Locke to compare it to the early American founding. So first, what are the defining features of scientific socialism? Well, let's define what is scientific socialism first. Just what's the terminology? What are 3 things that come to mind that explain scientific socialism? First, scientific socialism is dialectic, it is not utopian, and it's materialistic. So it's dialectic in that it is oppositional and binary, working off of the bourgeois versus the proletariat, right? The rich versus the poor, or the owners versus the workers. Okay, so scientific socialism is dialectic, non-utopian. It's non-utopian in the sense that it is not seeking a perfect society. It is actually practical. It's not ideological. It's not Hegelian. It's practical, and it can come to be in this world. And that's what socialism, utopian, and scientific, the piece by Engels, is all about, arguing that this socialism, true socialism, is scientific socialism, not utopian socialism. So that's what we mean by it's not utopian. And finally, it's material. So there is no metaphysical here. It is material, and it is having to do with the practical, physical world. That's what we're talking about. And it's also, so it's historical materialism is the third part of the scientific socialism, utopian, and scientific. So it's materialism. What is reality is food, clothing, and shelter, not necessarily so much life, liberty, property, but bodies, this world, not God, the world of forms, ideas, etc. It's materialism that we're after. So what you can taste, touch, sense, the 5 senses, the things that science today is all about, that would be materialism. Okay, so that's what scientific socialism is: dialectic, non-utopian, and materialistic. Now, what are the defining features of scientific socialism? So this is much broader, and there's 5. It's first, unapologetically class conscious, and I can't take credit for these 3. These 5 characteristics, kind of summations. They come from a professor of mine, Dr. Miller at University of Dallas. But first off, a defining feature of scientific socialism is that it's unapologetically class conscious. 2, it's revolutionary socialism. 3, it is dedicated to the abolition of private property. 4, it is expressly atheistic. 5, it is hostile to the traditional family. And 6, sorry, I said 5. 6, It is expressly international, transnational. So it's expansionistic. So let's walk through those 5 real quick. Unapologetically class conscious. So it's not like the U.S. progressives in this sense. They are class conscious. They are very aware of the differences between the worker and the bourgeois, right? Revolutionary socialism, it simply means that you must crush the ruling class. And what we mean by crushing is exactly that. It's like crushing grapes, but just crushing humans, okay? Crushing the ruling class by whatever means. We'll see that later on in Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution, and even later on with Stalin's purge. 3, dedication to the abolition of private property, which means that you need to replace private property with state-owned and directed economic production. That is a defining characteristic of scientific socialism. To replace private property with state-owned and directed economic production. 4 is expressly atheistic. It means that we must abolish, or this system must abolish, religion, which is man-made. Okay? Religion, and especially God, is all man-made. They're opiates of the masses, if you will, according to Marx in the Communist Manifesto. So this is overtly and expressly atheistic. Religion does not work, and in fact is an enemy of scientific socialism. 5, it's hostile to the traditional family, and this is also true because the bourgeois family is based on capital for them. You read through the Communist Manifesto, you read through Marx's works, you read through Engels, and you see that some of the roots of these problems are nourished or sustained or directly come from the traditional family, right? Where the wife and mother is suppressed, the man is also suppressing, and then there's basically just economic relationship that's driving the whole thing, and not to mention ownership of families, especially big and wealthy families throughout time. These things are the cause of the oppression of the proletariat. Finally, expressly international, transnational. So this means it is expansionistic. It does not regard borders or people groups or cultures. It is the goal of scientific socialism is to take over the world. The goal of the Communist Manifesto, the end words, workmen of all nations, unite, rise up, right? This is all nations, all countries, revolt is the idea here. So that's the basic idea. Those 6 things are very good summaries of scientific socialism. Now, remember, based on my last video, Intro to Scientific Socialism, which you'll notice Marxism is an even better intro to scientific socialism. But Marxism is these 3 ways. These are ways I characterize Marxism. It's anti-capitalistic, it's expansionistic, and it's atheistic. So it's kind of those 6 and prior kind of boiled down into 3. Now, remember to make sure to read and look at the conclusion of Engels' Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific in your reader or online to see the really quick summary of the historical evolution that's happening from medieval society, petty industry, moving through to capitalist revolution and the proletariat revolution. And the medieval society was individualistic and anarchical. The capitalist revolution introduced the contradiction, and it gave rise to the industrial reserve army. Basically, the working class that could become an army to overthrow and revolt against the bourgeois. And finally, you get the proletariat revolution. It is the solution to the contradiction that the proletariat is not appropriating from the means of production, but actually just doing the work. So slave labor, essentially. And those are their terms, not mine. And then also the proletarian revolution ushers in public property, and the goal, of course, is classless society. I don't think they've ever attained it, to my knowledge, an actual classless society, but that is the stated intention of the proletarian revolution. And what you'll notice, and what I'll get into later on as well, is this progression is not by choice. This progression, this historical evolution, is inevitable. So we want to ask, did Lenin intentionally take over? Was this inevitable? Are these things just revolutions, or are they just are they coup d'etats, or like just by choice, people just deciding to take over? Or are these inevitable things that must happen? Well, we'll see in the Communist Manifesto probably tomorrow that they're gonna. It's actually that they have two different. It's an internal contradiction of itself within communist writings on this. Okay, referencing once again question 30 on the Unit 3 oral exam guide. Looking at the questions: who owns, who uses, and who appropriates. Looking at petty industry, capitalism, and the proletariat revolution. Notice that the contradiction is under the who uses row and under communism. Technically, the center of the whole chart is the contradiction where the workers are using, but they're not appropriating the means of production. Okay, so and then finally, I just want to walk through really quickly how Marx would compare to Locke, and I'll do a whole video on this later on, but just very briefly, for Locke, individuals are natural. For Marx, the state is natural. For Locke, property rights are granted to individuals based on labor. For Marx, individual and property rights do not exist. For Locke, government is based on consent. For Marx, government is based on the elite, really, the leaders of the communist working class. And for Locke, revolutions are cyclical, whereas for Marx, the proletariat revolution is really the final form, even though they really argue that the history is really the history of class warfare, which is almost cyclical, but it stops with the proletariat revolution. So that is essentially a very quick image of the basics between liberalism, or classical liberalism, the ideology of the founding, and communism. Thanks, guys. We covered in this video the terminology of scientific socialism, the 6 defining features of scientific socialism, reviewed really quickly what was Marxism, looked at Engels' history, and we looked at the inherent contradiction and problem, and finally we looked at a comparison of Locke and Marx. Have a great day.